EcQuality, welcome to the Online Flooring Expo. It is so exciting to have you join us all the way from China. Whereabouts in China are you currently find yourself?
Thanks, Barry, and thanks, Belinda. It's really nice to be here. I'm located about 150 kilometers due west of Shanghai.
You know, I can see some absolutely gorgeous product in the background there. You're a specialist in solid timber flooring and some other solid timber products, but can you tell us a little bit more about what you stand for, your products, and how we can add some value with regards to our Online Flooring Expo?
So we're definitely a niche producer. We are essentially solid wood, and we also do some like 3-layer engineered. Still, we don't use the plywoods, but still solid oak mainly. But where we found a niche is really in a lot of the specialized parquetry products. So we can get sometimes an architect or one of our clients will come to us, send us drawings, and we'll have a look at them and say, yes, we can do that. We get all of the specs and work out some fairly complicated patterns, all in solid. We don't do the marquetry, which is, you know, you essentially use a laser cutter and put veneer on top of plywood. We're not talking about that sort of thing. We're talking about traditional solid parquetry, like the French Versailles panels and the Chantilly and that sort of Marie Antoinette, all that kind of thing. We do a lot of that. We're producing in China, but we're not producing the commodities, you know, the 15-4 engineered and things like that. We'll leave that to the Chinese companies, and some of our friends here do it very, very, very well and have been doing it for years and years, and they've got it down to a fine art. It's a lot different to when I came here 12 or 13 years ago, when, you know, there were so many players and you really didn't know, you know, whether the product was, you do your testing and stuff. It was more a question in those days of consistency. You'd always test something and find it's fine, and it'd be the second or third container you've got problems. So now it's improving. It has improved a lot, and a lot of the, you know, the bad eggs have dropped out. And there's some very good companies here doing that, but we can't compete with them. But we can do these specialized products, and that's where we've found our niche.
And Terry, one of the things that's a standout for your company is the commitment to product quality and sourcing and your people. Can you talk a little bit around some of the challenges of holding on to the values of people and quality in the midst of mass production?
What we found when we first came here was that workers there was no trust between workers and management. Management just regarded workers as expendable. They come and they go. They expect them to turn over. They'd keep a handful of people, but most of them would just come and go. And they may have some experience in other factories, but they're not really trained, and they're paid on a piece basis, a piecework basis, so that, you know, I would go through factories and they'd be producing my product when I first came, and I'd say, no, we can't have that. You need to take that one out. That's, you know, they have you know, a list of the things that our QC requirements. But I say, yeah, that's all done when they pack. Don't worry about it. We'll take that out when you pack. Oh, okay. And you go along and you'd find the packers putting it all in the boxes, and you'd stop them and say, no, you can't pack this. No, that can't go in. And you learn very quickly, they're on piece rates. They're contractors. They don't even work in the factory. They're called in when there's a packing job to be done, and they want to pack it as fast as they can. Anything they take out wastes a lot of time, and they don't get paid for. So you learn a lot about how Chinese factories operate, and we don't do any of that. Our people are paid properly. They have social insurance. They have annual leave. All through this COVID crisis, they went off for 10 days. We have a fairly short break. For a 10-day break, ended up having a month off, fully paid. So when our workers come back, other factories don't do that. When they start up in the new year, they put a sign out the front and say hiring, and some of their workers come back, and of course they get a job. But about 30 or 40 or 50%, depending on the year and the economic conditions, they're hiring new workers. So all of our workers came back. Kevin, our French designer and manager in the furniture area, has gone, unfortunately. But our flooring area is all completely just the same staff and no change. So lots of experience. Pay them properly, look after them properly. And after years of doing that, you build up a bit of a culture in the company. So if you get new workers come in, initially there's suspicions, but the other workers will talk to them. That they get it from the atmosphere. They feel that it's different here. So when people come and work for us, they tend to stay a long time. We don't have that turnover, very, very little. So yeah, it works much more like a foreign company.
This is like absolute music to my ears, because that consistency and connecting with the real people, and you're able to bank that quality in the end consumer all the way through that chain. Is absolutely paramount when people are looking for great product. It's not just about the product and the end result. It's also about the story attached to that product, which means so much, especially to me. Tell us a little bit more about where you source your materials from.
Our oak, it's very important to us that our oak is sourced as dried timber overseas. So our oak comes from Burgundy in France, and it's seasoned, kiln dried, and comes to us as what they call boules, which means it's the whole log cut through from end to end in slabs and stacked. It's been stacked out, then stacked back together again. And sometimes we get selected boards which are the same boules, but they've been pulled apart, and you want to get a particular grade. So we get it in that form. So usually that's been seasoned for about 6 months, and then it's kiln dried for the requisite amount of time. So it's not full of internal cracking, which is, you get your big end splits from a drying log, but you don't get a lot of that fine cracking that you find when you look at the way that they do it here. They bring the logs in, money from Germany and from Eastern Europe, and they saw them, and Russia, and they saw them all. And they go straight in the kiln. There's no seasoning here, straight in the kiln. And they don't worry about it, because when they dry it, and it's not good for the color, and the wood also gets a lot of this little fine cracking in it. But they fill it with putty. I said, nobody cares. But we know it's not really stable. We know it's not right. And so our material is a little more expensive. But, in the end product, if you're adding a couple of dollars a square meter, it's okay. When you're dealing with Chinese buyers, a lot of them say, I can buy it down the road for $2 cheaper. So, okay, that's fine, that's fine. But the people who really understand their wood, they know why we're doing it. And they know we're not, in fact, we're probably making less money than the Chinese guy is doing it the wrong way around, But we just simply can't take that wood and sell it as a properly produced high quality product. We have to bring in our wood and do it that way. And the other place we get is just north of Vienna in Austria. There's a very old family owned mill there as well, both family owned mills. And they've been looking after us for probably 8 or 9 years, and they're excellent as well, and just very reliable. We know what we're going to get. And the only thing is with that wood, they can't get quite the widths and lengths that we can get out of France. We can get the really big boules that can be 600 or 700 mil in diameter, and get some great big slabs out of it. So sometimes we need that for furniture. But for flooring, we use those to make our 220 wide boards. And that product is 220 wide and usually starts at about 1,300 through to 5.5, which is the maximum you can put in a container. But I have to say, we don't get many of those 5.5s these days. 3.6 and more than 3.6. We try to get a lot of 3.6s and that sort of size in there, but they're getting a bit harder to get. But if you pay enough money, we can get them.
That whole timing aspect of so often we have projects on our side of the world, or I can imagine everywhere else in the world, where if there is a very clean specification and if there's a architect or interior designer wanting that something special, that they can engage with you, and generally we have quite a few months or maybe even years before the product, the flooring product, needs to be on site. So can South African architects and interior designs connect with you directly, and that you can walk them through a process, even if it's not a full container?
This is what we're doing a lot into Australia, particularly into Melbourne, where we don't deal, there's no reason why we can't, we don't deal at the moment directly with the architects. Usually there's a specialist in between who's a flooring specialist who we'll deal with, and either a retailer or an agent. We have an agent in Melbourne who's a former retailer, and he specialises in doing this sort of thing, connecting architects with product. And so we work with companies like that and work up the specification. So we'll get a specification, we'll have a look at it and say, look, that's great, but if you just change this a little bit, you know, for example, he'll say that they'll want 50 mils thick stair treads in solid. We say, yeah, okay, but we start off with the wood at about 55 sawn, and by the time we machine it down, we can get 45 out of it. To get the 50, we need to buy 75. You know, we know this stuff very well. We'll go back to them and say, can it be changed to 45? That'll save a lot of money. And then, you know, we work with those sort of details. Everybody's happy, and then we supply. And it can be, you know, 150, 200 square meters. It can be smaller, of course. And for us, the price, you know, people say, well, can you do it if it's only like 80 square meters? Well, you can. Of course, there's the shipping costs, again, and the clearance costs per square meter are going to be a bit higher. But if that's not an issue, and often it's not, because often these guys, the kind of products we're dealing with, I guess the retail end, they're being charged, you know, $150 or something a square meter, or $200, I mean, for some jobs. So the freight cost is not the big deal, not the major consideration. It's the quality and whether they can, you know, they can source it from us. And with South Africa, I imagine for this sort of thing, they can't source it easily from Chinese factories because there's a communication issue. There's also an issue of very different expectations. The Chinese guy will say, well, I can save you $5 by, you know, I can just you know, dry it to 11 or 12 instead of, you know, dry it down properly and bring it back up again, and we know it's all stable. You know, there's all sorts of funny things that they think that the customer's going to really appreciate, that they've managed to cut a couple of dollars out of the price. And when it gets there, of course, it's all twisting and buckling and doing everything wrong. But so there are these sort of different expectations. I'm not trying to bag the Chinese guys. I know that some of these engineered flooring companies do a very good job. But when you're doing specialized, like bespoke products, you really have to understand a lot more about the expectations on the other side, and that they just don't have access to that generally. So, so I think for us, that's our advantage. We know the market, and I guess the experience for us, the learning experience for us, has been how to do all of this in China. But we've been doing it for 12 or 13 years now, so we're kind of on both ends, and we're now the meat in the sandwich. So yeah, we make it work.
So Terry, can you tell us a little bit more about some of the more popular products in the flooring category that you are making, and maybe we can just get a little bit of an idea of what is available?
So in the oak products, we do quite a bit of herringbone and chevron in the the standard sizes for us. Tend to be about 90 by 600, 630 for the chevron and herringbones. And we can also do the wider ones, and up to, we do some 150. It gets a little tricky. The wider you get with herringbones and chevrons, the more likely you are to have issues with angles. They have to be incredibly precise as that width goes out, especially with chevrons. So we encourage people to go for those, to go for that the 90. We don't use a machine. We don't use a double end tenon to do that, because we find that even if you can set it up correctly, and you're checking every half hour, it can move a little. I'm sure there must be machines out there made by somebody, but they probably cost $300,000. So we're not going to be doing that. What we do is we can use the double end tenon to saw both ends, but we use the spindle molder. We do it essentially manually, and that way we get it very, very accurate, because when we set up for that, it's pretty much impossible that anything moves. And so, of course, we do checks, but it's a slower way to do things, but it's a more accurate way. So that's the chevrons and herringbones. The herringbones are done on a machine. And we do a lot of parquetry, the large panels, 866 by 866 by 18, 100 by 600 by 18 in the Marie Antoinette, and the reduced Versailles panels. And we do all of those things also in black walnut, in teak, in Australian jarrah, and Australian cypress. Wow. And they're just lovely products. So when we sell, particularly the oak, though, that's the big seller, is the oak. But all those others are available, and we do produce them. We don't use any glue, screws, or nails. There's nothing. There's no tape. Nothing. Everything is fully tongue and groove internally. Every single piece is tongue and groove and fits together. So nothing can lift out a panel. You know, when if it's been glued down, sometimes if you're using the butt jointed ones that's just been taped on the back, you can get pieces in a year or two, 10 years, coming loose, right? That can't happen with our panels. Absolutely impossible, because each piece and also that the stability is different when you do it that way, because your panel is not glued together. It's all just the same as a conventional tongue and groove floor. Every piece can move when it's glued down, can move independently, expand and contract independently. So there's no tension within the panel itself.
And are you selling products that are pre-finished or stained, or are they all sent across raw?
So we do all of that. I mean, in-house, we do the various oil products. If people have a preference for Walker or for Rubio or for another product like Loba, we can access all those here and use those products. It can be a little tricky if people are just going to send me a code, because the Chinese agents here may substitute some of the pigments and match it. These are things that happen. So we like to if you're going to do that, we like to have a physical sample. Unless the customer says, yeah, well, this is the color. One shade off is not going to be a big deal. That's fine too. But normally we like to get a physical sample, and we can match it very closely. If we're doing UV oil or UV lacquer, we have one paint line. It's not mine, but it's a company that we've been using for a number of years, and they can do, because paint lines normally are not so wide, but we can do the 866 panels through the pre-finishing line, and we can get a really, really good finish on them with a lacquer or a UV oil. So all those things are available too.
Part of the purpose and the focus of this online expo is to rally the flooring industry together and to talk about our shared experiences of what we're all going through. Maybe you could share some of your insights on what would be the secret sauce that companies need to pay attention to coming out of the COVID crisis and going into recovery.
You know, what I've been doing is reaching out to people. You know, I spent a lot of time and effort over the last 3 or 4 years in attempting to go online and to have better branding and to sell my products online. And I think I've contributed a lot of money to the coffers and helped stimulate the economy, and particular companies like Alibaba, like Amazon, like every other online platform, and every web developer has had a piece of me. What I've learned from that is, you know, when I started years ago, like 20 odd years ago, and internet was all very new, I could write an email to, I speak Japanese, so I could write an email to somebody in Japan who I'd never met. And Japanese people like to be introduced, by the way. But at that time, if you could speak Japanese and read and write, I could send off an email and I'd get an answer, even if it was just a polite answer saying that that's not something that they're in. And I'd say, well, next time I come to Japan, would you mind if I dropped in? That sort of thing. And I'd get business that way. You can send all the emails in the world and you can personalize them, you do whatever you like. And nobody's going to answer you. As a friend of mine said, when on the internet, he's a British guy, and he said, why are you doing all that? He's a more traditional sort of guy that's very hands-on with everything. And he said, you might as well just go up in a plane and throw your business cards out the window. That's what you're doing. It made an impression on me. And I think, particularly with the COVID thing, that's really driven it home to me. You actually, now that I can't actually go and see people, because the big plan this year was to spend a lot of my, we did 4 trade shows last year, but this year I didn't want to do as many. Not going to do too many, as it happens now. But I was intending to spend that money on traveling, going and actually pressing the flesh, talking to people. But I'm doing it now on the phone though, ringing people and actually just talking about how they're going. It's really important now during COVID to talk to people about how they're going, because everybody is very, very worried about cash flow, particularly 2 or 3 months out from now. Even if you've got a war chest, these jobs that we're doing, like, they're busy. We came back in the middle of February, which was 2 weeks later than we'd planned, but we looked after our workers for that time. We started work with plenty of jobs to do because we were a little bit behind. And we're still working through that and had a couple of orders. So we're right until probably end of April, possibly through to the first week of May. And in the meantime, we hope we've got a couple of orders, which we're still been talking about since last year, and they'll come through, I think. So that'll be okay. But the builders in Australia, and I'm pretty sure it's the same everywhere, will be saying, yes, we're finishing off current projects. Now, the flooring, as you know, goes in pretty much last, so we're okay for that 3 months. But after that, what happens if none of these projects are coming online? We're all worried about that. So it's really, really important to reach out to people, talk to them about how they're feeling, and do what you can. We want to keep things rolling, and the more we can do that, I think that'll help. Anyway, for me, it's trying to make it personal.
Hats off to you. I really resonate with how you are running your business and the ethos that is a foundational stone to that. That is something that is really special to me personally. And really, thank you very much for joining us here on our Online Flooring Expo. We really appreciate your support, and we wish you all the best in this time of turbulence. And we welcome a successful recovery, really. Stay safe, please.
Thank you.